Hey guys, tonight we slip gently back to the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, into a world where dawn smells of wet clay and the future of civilization is still something like an experiment. You are in ancient Sumer, around 2500 BCE, and you, lucky you, are a farmer. Well, maybe lucky is a stretch, since the work is endless, and your back is going to remind you about that later. You probably won't survive this life for more than 30 or 40 years, but for now, you've got breath in your lungs and a day ahead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and your local time in the comments, so I can see who's drifting off across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sounds you hear are not the melodic calls of birds, though yes, some cranes and herons might flap lazily over the reeds, but mostly the sharp insistence of roosters and the shuffle of neighbors already stirring. Your home is a simple mud brick structure, its walls plastered and drying in the rising heat. The smell is earthy, faintly damp, because dew still clings to the thatch and clay. You roll over on your reed mat, scratch an itch from last night's mosquito bites, and blink at the rectangle of light creeping in through the doorway. The courtyard is alive with motion, children squabbling over a clay toy, women sweeping dust, and your neighbor who has an uncanny talent for loudly coughing just when you want silence. You grunt, stand, and stretch. Your bones pop in protest, because yes, even in 2500 BCE, mornings are rough. You step outside barefoot into the cool grit. The street isn't paved, it's a worn track of trampled earth, dotted with goat droppings and the occasional discarded reed rope. Still, it's home. This is one of the bustling cities of Sumer, though your own quarter feels more like a village stitched together inside city walls. Above you, the sky is still pale gray, slowly bleeding into pink. The temple ziggurat dominates the horizon, a stepped mountain of sun-dried brick, stacked so high you wonder how people don't get dizzy climbing it. The priests will already be up there, muttering prayers to Enlil or Inanna, probably while sipping something more delicious than the gritty barley beer you'll get later. But for now, your day begins with chores. Always chores. You walk back into your house where your wife is already grinding grain on a heavy basalt slab, rhythmically moving a stone roller back and forth until flour sifts out. The sound is steady, almost like breathing. She doesn't look up when you come in, because in truth, this is routine, and you're just another body moving through the space. There's a small water basin in the corner, filled yesterday from the canal. You splash your face. It's not cold anymore, just tepid, but still refreshing. You grab a twig, fibrous, frayed at the end, and chew it to brush your teeth. Historians still argue whether Sumerians really had the concept of dental hygiene or just like chewing sticks, but you know from experience that after chewing one, your mouth feels less swampy. That counts. As you rinse, a mosquito buzzes too close, and you swat it with the precision of someone who has already lost too much blood to these buzzing demons. Funny thing is, clay tablets mention using crocodile dung as a kind of protective paste. You don't have crocodile dung handy this morning, but honestly, do you really want to smear yourself with that? Probably not. Outside, someone is already hollering about an escaped goat, and the clamor of early life rises. This is not a quiet dawn. It is noisy, bustling, filled with movement. Civilization is young, but humans are already excellent at being slightly too loud, too early. The smell of barley porridge wafts in. Your stomach rumbles. But before breakfast, there's always that little mental inventory. Tools in place? Oxen still tethered? Floodwater level in the canal manageable? You'll check it all later, but the awareness hangs heavy, like a list you can't stop rehearsing. Still, for a fleeting moment, you step outside again and let yourself watch the horizon. The sun is climbing now, golden light sliding down the temple, casting long shadows across mud brick walls. The air is warming. In a few hours, it will be stifling. You enjoy the breeze while it lasts. A dog trots past, wagging its tail, carrying half a reed basket in its mouth like some proud offering. You laugh softly because humor survives every age. And maybe, just maybe, this is the nicest part of the day, those few minutes before the real work begins, when the city hums awake and you feel like you're part of something larger. Civilization itself, historians say, sprouts here in Sumer. Agriculture, writing, laws, so many firsts. Of course, from your perspective, it just means endless obligations. Fields to plow, canals to repair, priests to appease. But isn't that the story of every age? The grand innovations of history are usually someone else's paperwork. A neighbor greets you, his beard scraggly, his tunic dusty already. He waves a clay jug of beer and jokes, "Breakfast?" You grin, wave him off. Too early. Besides, you'll need your wits about you to wrangle oxen later. He shrugs, takes a swig, and wanders on. Classic. The roosters crow again, though honestly they've been crowing non-stop since midnight, as if competing for some invisible trophy. You sigh, brush a bit of dust from your tunic, and glance back at the interior of your home. The mat is still rumpled, the floor scattered with grain husks, the walls etched faintly with soot from last night's oil lamp. Ordinary details, but comforting in their own way. Life expectancy here isn't long. You know this in your bones, in the stories of neighbors who didn't see another planting season. Yet each dawn feels like a small defiance. You're still here. You're still waking to the smell of earth, the chatter of neighbors, and the relentless crowing of birds. The city is alive now. From the direction of the temple, you hear drums, deep, slow, ceremonial. Priests call to the gods, asking for fertile fields, safe floods, good harvests. Whether the gods listen or not, who knows? Historians still argue whether those rituals were sincere devotion or more about political theater. To you, though, they're background music, woven into every morning. You stretch again, roll your shoulders, and let the warmth of the sun finally hit your face. It's gonna be another long, exhausting day in Sumer. But for now, at this first breath of dawn, you feel awake, alive, and oddly at peace. Your stomach growls again. Time for breakfast. You shuffle toward the corner of your small courtyard, where the household basin waits. It's nothing fancy, just a large clay jar sunk into the ground, filled with water you carried yesterday from the canal. Overnight, the water has gone a little murky with silt, and you swear a frog might have hopped in at some point. You shrug. At this point in your life, you're less worried about frogs than about dehydration. You kneel and scoop up a splash in your cupped hands, throwing it over your face. The shock is mild, since the water is already lukewarm, but it does the trick. Dust and sweat from the sticky night rinse away. You bend closer, peer into the rippling surface, and catch your own reflection. Your beard is patchy, your eyes bleary, but hey, you're still standing. In Sumer, that counts as a win. A child darts past you, your son, laughing as he clutches a reed toy shaped like a tiny boat. He kicks up dust, nearly knocks over a basket of onions, and disappears through the doorway before you can bark his name. You sigh, splash more water on your face, and think briefly about how every household in the neighborhood probably looks the same at this hour. Parents trying to keep order, children running wild, goats being louder than goats have any right to be. You pick up a chewed twig from the shelf by the doorway. The end is frayed, softened from use. You stick it in your mouth, chewing until the fibers spread into something like bristles. Then you rub it across your teeth. It's not minty fresh, but it beats walking around with barley bread grit stuck in your molars. Historians still argue whether Sumerians used twigs from specific medicinal trees or just any old branch within reach. Either way, you feel a little cleaner now, even if your breath still carries the faint aroma of yesterday's onion stew. As you scrub, a mosquito buzzes around your ear. You swat it with a practiced flick and miss. It circles back like it's taunting you, then lands on your arm. This time you slap it flat, leaving behind a little smear of blood that, let's be honest, is probably not even yours. Mosquitoes have no respect for property rights. You mutter under your breath and wipe your arm clean with the hem of your tunic. Funny thing, someone once swore by crocodile dung as a mosquito repellent. Maybe it worked, maybe it was a cruel prank passed down through generations. You picture yourself smearing that across your arms, smelling like a swamp monster all day, and shake your head. No thanks, you'll take the bites. You lean back on your heels, dripping water from your beard, and glance toward the alleyway outside your home. Neighbors are already moving about. One woman balances a clay jar on her head, walking with the practiced grace of someone who could probably do it in her sleep. Another man crouches in the dust, retying the strap on his sandal. The smell of smoke from a hearth drifts in, carrying with it the faint aroma of frying onions. It makes your stomach growl, even though you know what's waiting for you inside isn't much better than gritty bread. Your wife steps into the courtyard, wipes her hands on her tunic, and hands you a small cloth. You dry your face and hands, then hang the cloth on a peg by the doorway. She nods approvingly. Small rituals matter. Staying clean doesn't just keep you comfortable, it keeps sickness at bay, at least as much as anyone in your world can hope. Behind her, your youngest daughter toddles out, barefoot, holding a lump of clay. She shoves it towards you proudly. It's supposed to be a figurine of a sheep, though it looks more like a blob with 4 stubs. You smile, pat her head, and tell her it's beautiful. She beams, then promptly drops it in the dust. Typical. As you stretch your arms overhead, you feel the weight of the day settling on your shoulders. There's a rhythm to all this. Wash, chew the twig, chase off mosquitoes, nod to the neighbors. These small actions mark the boundary between night's rest and the grind of labor. Without them, the day would blur into endless toil. Somewhere down the street, a man yells at his donkey. The animal brays in protest, stubborn as ever. The sound bounces off the mud brick walls, joined by the clatter of pots, the squawk of chickens, and the sharp call of a woman demanding her children stop climbing the roof. Civilization in all its noisy glory. You pick up a small bronze comb from the shelf and run it through your hair. It snags, pulling out a couple of knots, but the act makes you feel slightly more put together. Quirky fact, bronze combs were status symbols here. A farmer like you having one might seem surprising, but the truth is, markets overflow with trinkets traded from faraway lands. Sometimes you can snag something shiny when the merchants are desperate to offload. You're not rich, but you're not about to let your hair look like a goat's backside either. As you finish, the drums from the temple begin again, slow, steady beats echoing over the rooftops. The priests are summoning the gods to witness another day of human effort. Whether the gods care, who can say? Historians still argue whether Sumerians truly believed their prayers altered the floods, or whether it was more about keeping social order. You don't dwell on it. The sound is just part of life, like the crow of roosters or the slap of water in your basin. You take one last scoop, rinsing the dust from your hands, and feel a moment of gratitude for the simple gift of water. Not everyone in the city has easy access, and every year, the river's moods threaten to wash it all away. This basin, this courtyard, this act of washing, it grounds you. Your wife calls from inside. Breakfast is ready. You nod, stretch once more, and glance toward the horizon. The sun is higher now, gilding the city walls, catching on the ziggurat like fire on stone. The day is waiting, full of labor, sweat, and probably more mosquito bites. But you've washed, you've chewed your twig, and you feel just awake enough to face it. You duck back inside, stomach growling, ready for barley and dates. Inside, the air is warm with the smell of barley. Your wife crouches over the grinding stone, pushing the heavy roller back and forth across the grain. The scrape is steady, almost hypnotic, like the heartbeat of the household. You take a seat on a low reed stool, and soon enough, she hands you a small round of bread. It's dense, flat, and already crumbling at the edges. You bite into it, and immediately you're reminded. Grit. Always grit. No matter how finely she grinds, tiny bits of stone from the millstone sneak in, leaving you with the delightful experience of sandpapering your molars. Congratulations, your teeth will thank you later by wearing down decades too soon. Still, it fills the belly. You chew slowly, breaking off a piece to dip into a small bowl of mashed dates. The sweetness cuts through the dryness, and for a brief moment, you almost forget the grit. Your youngest daughter waddles over, reaching for your bread with sticky hands. You give her a piece, and she immediately drops it in the dust, then picks it up without hesitation. You glance at your wife, who shrugs. Floor spice, she seems to say, adds texture. Beside you, your son slurps noisily from a cup of watered-down beer. Don't imagine a frothy pint glass. This is thick, cloudy, and closer to liquid bread than anything you'd call refreshing. You lift your own cup, take a sip, and wince at the sour tang. It's not terrible, but let's just say you wouldn't pay temple prices for this stuff. Still, it's safer than water straight from the river, so you drink. The family eats together in a kind of practiced silence, broken by little moments of laughter. Your son tries to tell a joke about a goat falling into a canal, but halfway through he forgets the punchline. Everyone groans, and you tease him that maybe he should stick to farming instead of farming. He grins, flicks a crumb at you, and ducks before you can swat him. From outside, the morning noise grows louder. Neighbors calling to each other, dogs barking, and the distant sound of a merchant shouting about fresh fish down at the market. The city is awake, bustling, and so are you, fortified by your humble breakfast. Here's a fact you probably don't think about as you chew. Barley is the backbone of your entire world. It feeds your family, it ferments into beer, and it even pays your taxes. The priests don't want your jokes, your laughter, or your broken sandals. They want sacks of barley. Without it, society collapses. With it, you survive another season. It's funny how the fate of empires often rests on something so unglamorous as grain. You take another bite, crunch through another bit of stone, and sigh. One quirky tidbit you've heard: some Sumerians liked to flavor their bread with herbs or honey, but around here, luxuries like that rarely find their way into your kitchen. You once tried mixing in extra dates to impress your neighbor at a feast, but the bread burned and stuck to the pan. He still teases you about it when he passes by. Breakfast winds down. Your wife gathers the bowls, rinsing them quickly with a splash from the water jar. Your son lingers, licking the last sweet date mash from his fingers. You pretend not to notice when he sneaks another piece of bread from the basket. He'll burn it off chasing goats anyway. You lean back, belly warm, and glance at the doorway. Outside, the light is growing stronger, harsher. The cool comfort of dawn is fading. You know what comes next: the fields. You'll need to check the calendar, those clay tablet marks scratched by the village scribe, to be sure it's the right day to plow. But first, you let yourself savor this moment. Bread, dates, beer, family. Simple, ordinary, and yet the foundation of your entire existence. Your wife breaks the quiet by chuckling. "You still chew like an ox," she says, shaking her head. You raise your cup of beer in mock salute. "Better an ox than a donkey," you reply. She laughs, and for a second, the weight of the day ahead feels lighter. From the corner of the room, your daughter pipes up with a question. "Baba, why do we always eat barley?" You pause mid-bite. How do you explain to a child that civilization itself depends on this stubborn grain? Instead, you ruffle her hair and say, "Because barley makes you strong." She beams, satisfied with the answer, and goes back to gnawing on her crumb. Historians still argue whether children in Sumer truly understood how central agriculture was, or whether they just grew up surrounded by it like air. But in your home, it's not a debate, it's just life. Barley today, barley tomorrow, barley forever. As you finish your cup, you set it down with a dull thud. The meal is over. You wipe your hands on your tunic, stretch your arms, and prepare to step outside. The day won't wait, and the fields certainly won't plow themselves. But at least you've had your breakfast, the kind of meal that keeps you upright, even if it leaves your teeth feeling like you've chewed gravel. You rise, exchange a quick word with your wife, and nod to your children. Then you duck through the doorway, back into the brightening light. Ahead lies work, sweat, and the constant murmur of the river. But behind you, the laughter and warmth of breakfast lingers, a small anchor against the tide of labor. You step back into the courtyard, stomach pleasantly heavy from barley and dates, though your teeth are still reminding you about the grit. The air is brighter now, the sun clearing the horizon, chasing away the softer hues of dawn. This is the moment when thought gives way to planning. Before the real sweat of the fields begins, you need to check what the stars and scribes have to say about today's work. On a low shelf near the wall rests a clay tablet, baked hard from the last time it sat too close to the hearth. It's covered with little wedge-shaped impressions, cuneiform, the mighty script of Sumer. You aren't a scribe, so don't expect to read every sign yourself. Still, some of the markings are familiar. The scratches that tell you which week to sow, which days to leave the oxen resting, when the temple demands deliveries. You squint at it, tracing your finger along the rough ridges, pretending you understand more than you do. This tablet is your calendar, or at least the closest thing you've got. Priests and scribes make these records based on the movement of stars and the cycle of the moon. They'll insist that today is perfect for plowing, or for repairing dikes, or for offering a lamb to Inanna. Whether they're divining cosmic truth or just trying to justify their temple salaries is another matter. Historians still argue whether the Sumerian calendar was primarily astronomical or political, designed to keep farmers like you on task, or to align the gods' moods with tax collection. You tilt the tablet in the sun, catch a shadow across one set of marks, and mutter. According to this, it's a favorable day for beginning fieldwork again. Great. That means no excuses. You glance toward your oxen, still tethered in the pen by the house. One is lazily flicking flies with its tail. The other is chewing in that slow, indifferent way that makes you question whether it's thinking about anything at all. Lucky beasts, they don't need to read tablets. Your neighbor passes by, carrying his own clay shard. He catches your eye, raises his eyebrows, and asks, "Is it plowing today or tomorrow?" You shrug, hold up your tablet. "Today, it seems." He frowns. "My tablet says tomorrow." You both laugh. Classic. Even in a city of writing and record-keeping, the scribes can't quite agree. Maybe one had too much beer the night before he pressed those wedge marks. Maybe another just wanted an early nap. Either way, the heavens may decree one thing, but down here in the dust, you'll follow your stomach and your instincts. The soil waits for no scribe. Still, there's comfort in ritual. You set the tablet back on the shelf and bow your head briefly. Not a formal prayer, just a quick acknowledgement. Whether the stars truly dictate your fate or not, it feels safer to nod along. After all, if the gods are watching and you ignore the signs, you could end up with fields of weeds instead of barley. And worse, your wife would never let you live that down. You wander to the gate, leaning against the wooden frame, and gaze up at the brightening sky. The moon has already faded, but some of the constellations you know linger in your mind. There's the plow star, the one the elders point out to remind you when to break the soil. There's the great bull of heaven, which the poets say Inanna once unleashed in anger, though to you it just looks like a crooked line of dots. You chuckle quietly. Leave it to poets to make everything dramatic. To a farmer, stars are just a clock in the sky, shining reminders of when to work. A rooster crows again. You sigh. Maybe the rooster is the more honest calendar. When it crows, you get up. When it crows again, you get moving. Simple, no wedge marks required. But you still can't ignore that clay tablet. It carries authority, weight, even mystery. Sometimes the scribe himself visits the market and reads aloud from a whole tablet of predictions. This week, the floods will rise. Or, this month, avoid planting too deep. You nod along like everyone else, though half the time you're thinking, I knew that already just by looking at the river. One quirky tidbit you've heard some farmers swear by watching the behavior of frogs instead of the stars. If the frogs croak more loudly, they say, rain is coming. If they're quiet, it means dry skies. Honestly, you trust the frogs as much as the scribes. They don't carry temple agendas, they just croak. You step back into the courtyard, the clay cool beneath your feet, and glance once more at the tablet. You imagine future generations puzzling over these marks, debating what they mean. Maybe someone far away, thousands of years later, will hold one and think, these were the first attempts at organizing time. You grin at the thought. If only they knew how often the tablets contradicted each other, or how much you relied on the sun and your aching back more than on tiny wedge impressions. Still, the calendar serves its purpose. It tells you today is for plowing. And so, like countless mornings before, you gather your resolve. The oxen need to be yoked, the plow dragged to the field, the soil broken open. The calendar, the stars, the frogs, they all converge on this truth. The work must begin. You pick up your staff, slap the dust from your tunic, and step toward the pen. The oxen snort as if in acknowledgement, though more likely they're just annoyed you're about to put them to work. You grin, mutter, "Don't worry, I hate this as much as you do," and head off to fetch the yoke. The oxen are waiting, broad-shouldered and slow-eyed, in the pen by your courtyard wall. They are enormous creatures, with hides the color of wet clay and horns that curve like crescent moons. Their tails swish lazily, knocking dust into the air and slapping against their own flanks to scatter the flies. You stand at the gate, hands on your hips, and sigh. These beasts may be your most valuable possessions, but they also have a knack for making your life difficult at exactly the wrong moments. You grab the yoke from where it hangs on a peg. It's a heavy wooden beam with two curved notches to fit across the oxen's necks. The leather straps dangle from its sides, stiff from yesterday's sweat and sun. You run your hand along the wood, checking for cracks. If this yoke splits in the field, your whole day collapses with it. The thought makes you rub it twice, like a good luck charm. Stepping into the pen, you clap your hands and mutter encouragement. The first ox looks at you with bored disdain, chewing cud like a philosopher considering the futility of life. The second flicks an ear and shifts its weight, stamping a hoof into the dirt. You approach slowly. Calm is the trick. You've learned that rushing them only earns you a stomped toe, or worse, a headbutt to the ribs. You slip the yoke over their necks, one at a time. The wood settles heavily, pressing into their thick hides. You adjust the leather straps, tightening them with knots you've tied so often your hands work without thinking. One strap creaks, threatening to snap, and you mutter under your breath. You'll need to replace that before long. Maybe barter at the market for fresh leather. For now, you tug it tighter and hope it holds. The oxen grunt, shifting closer together, and you pat their flanks. "Good boys," you whisper, though you're not entirely sure they deserve the compliment. One snorts in response, spraying a bit of warm air onto your arm. You wipe it off, grimacing. The joys of livestock. Your son darts into the pen, barefoot and eager. He clutches a stick and taps one ox gently on the side. "I'll drive them today, Baba," he declares, with the bravado of someone who doesn't yet know how much sweat is involved. You chuckle, shake your head, and ruffle his hair. "Not yet. Maybe when you're taller than the yoke." He pouts, but you hand him a rope to lead instead. That way he feels important, and you get an extra set of hands. Together, you guide the oxen out of the pen. Their hooves thud against the ground, slow and deliberate. The animals lumber into the street, and neighbors step aside, nodding as you pass. Everyone knows the sight of yoked oxen means a day's labor is about to begin. One old man leans on his cane and calls out, "May your furrows be straight." You grin, nod back, and resist the urge to reply, "They're only straight until the ox sneezes." As you walk, you can't help but think about how central these animals are to your existence. Without them, plowing would mean dragging the wooden blade yourself, bent double, sweating until your arms give out. With them, the soil yields faster, the work spreads wider, and the harvest grows larger. The oxen are not just beasts, they are extensions of your own strength. There's a mainstream fact every Sumerian farmer knows. Oxen were among the first domesticated animals in this land, vital for turning the rich alluvial soil. Without them, Sumer might never have supported cities like Uruk, or Lagash. With them, fields stretch farther, granaries swell fuller, and kings grow richer. You, of course, just want enough barley to keep your family fed. You turn down a narrow lane, leading toward the open fields beyond the city wall. The oxen plod along, unhurried, tails flicking. Your son skips ahead, tugging at the rope, pretending he's the master of the herd. You laugh softly, shaking your head at his enthusiasm. Childhood is the only time farming feels like play. One quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Some say that oxen, if treated kindly, remember their owners for life. Others claimed they bear grudges, waiting years for the perfect chance to step on your foot. You glance at the nearest hoof, massive, heavy, perfectly positioned to crush your toes, and wince at the memory of last season when you limped for a week. Yes, you believe the grudge theory. Absolutely. The city wall looms ahead, its mud brick surface glowing in the sunlight. Beyond it, the fields stretch wide, flat, and waiting. You can already smell the dampness of the soil carried on the breeze from the canals. The oxen snort, sensing where they're headed. Their pace quickens slightly, though you suspect that's more from eagerness to graze than any enthusiasm for plowing. As you pass through the gate, a group of farmers joins you, each with their own beasts and tools. There's laughter, chatter, the slap of sandals on packed earth. One man jokes that his ox refuses to work unless it's bribed with onions. Another swears his beast listens better to his wife's voice than to his own. You all laugh, because somehow complaining about oxen makes them easier to tolerate. Historians still argue whether Sumerian farmers shared communal herds or kept mostly private ones. In your experience, it's a mix. The animals belong to households, but when the plowing season comes, everyone works side by side. After all, the soil doesn't care whose ox drags the plow, it only cares that it's turned. The open plain greets you, stretching toward the horizon in shades of brown and green. The irrigation ditches glisten in the morning sun, carrying precious water from the Euphrates. Birds scatter as you approach, wings flashing. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of wet earth. This is your life, your livelihood, your inheritance. And it all begins with yoking the oxen, leather straps cutting across their broad shoulders, wooden beam creaking as they shift. You guide them to the edge of your field, pat their flanks once more, and adjust the straps again. The yoke sits firm, the plow lies ready. Your son grins, eager to watch. You smile back, though you know the real work is just beginning. The oxen snort, paw the soil, and you mutter, "All right, boys, let's see if we can make this straight." The day stretches ahead, long and heavy, but for now, you've taken the first step. The yoke is secure, the beasts are tethered, and the fields are waiting. The plow rests where you left it yesterday, leaning against a reed fence. It's not much to look at, a long wooden shaft, roughly hewn, with a heavy wedge of sharpened timber at the bottom. No iron here. Metal is too costly for a farmer's tools. This blade is just wood, hardened by fire, darkened at the edges, and smoothed by countless furrows dragged through clay. You pick it up, test its weight, and sigh. Familiar, dependable, and unforgiving. You hitch the plow to the yoke, sliding the pole into place between the oxen. The leather straps creak as you fasten them. The beasts shift, already annoyed at being pressed into service so early. One stamps its hoof in protest. The other gives a low, rumbling grunt that sounds suspiciously like a complaint. You pat their flanks, whispering encouragement. "Come on, boys, the barley won't plant itself." Your son watches with wide eyes, clutching the rope as if he's the general commanding an army. He tugs gently, leading the oxen forward, and the plow jerks into motion. You grip the handles, leaning your weight against them, guiding the wooden blade as it bites into the soil. The ground resists at first. The alluvial earth is thick, heavy with moisture from the river's last flood. You grunt, pushing harder, until finally the plow carves a line, a rough groove in the brown earth. The smell rises immediately, wet clay, rich and fertile. You breathe it in deeply. This is the scent of life in Sumer, the very reason cities like and Uruk exist. But don't be fooled, it's exhausting work. You press your shoulders against the plow, forcing it deeper, while the oxen strain at the yoke. Their muscles ripple under their hides, hooves sinking slightly with every step. The wooden blade drags, grinds, and lifts clods of earth, turning the surface into furrows. Your arms ache almost instantly. This is not a task for the faint-hearted or the short-winded. Every few steps you curse under your breath as the plow hits a stone. The blade jolts, nearly jerking the handle out of your hands. You steady it, kick the stone aside, and keep going. Your son laughs, but when you hand him the handles to try, he barely manages 3 steps before the plow veers sideways. He yelps, letting go, and you catch it just in time. You ruffle his hair, grinning. Not so easy, eh? He pouts, but the lesson is learned. Farming looks simple until you actually try it. The furrows slowly stretch across the field, uneven but serviceable. Sweat drips down your back, soaking your tunic. You wipe your brow with your sleeve, leaving a streak of mud across your face. The sun climbs higher, burning away the last of the morning coolness. The oxen snort, their breath steaming in the warming air. As you guide the plow, you can't help but think of the yearly rhythm that rules your life. The floods come, spreading rich silt across the plain. Then, as the waters recede, you plow and sow. Without this pattern, the soil would dry and crack, nothing would grow, and your family would starve. Every furrow you cut now is a small insurance against hunger later. A mainstream fact every Sumerian knows. The Tigris and Euphrates are both gift and threat. Too little flood and the crops wither. Too much and the fields vanish underwater. The gods, it seems, love to keep you guessing. You pause to rest, leaning on the plow handles, and glance at the oxen. They chew slowly on nothing, pretending they're already grazing. One flicks its tail at a fly, nearly smacking your son in the face. He ducks, laughing. You roll your eyes. Even in the middle of work, the beasts find a way to mock you. One quirky tidbit drifts into your mind that oxen can sense earthquakes before they happen. They'll snort, stamp, or suddenly refuse to move. You've never witnessed it yourself, but you remember your grandfather swearing that his ox once dragged him out of a field minutes before the ground shook. Whether it's true or just a farmer's tale, you're not sure. But as you watch your beasts twitch their ears, you wonder if maybe they know more than they let on. You spit into the dirt, rub your sore hands, and get back to it. The plow sinks again, carving another line. Step by step, furrow by furrow, the field transforms from flat crust into a pattern of ridges and valleys, ready for seed. Around you, other farmers work too. You hear their shouts, the groan of their beasts, the thud of hooves in the soil. One man's plow breaks with a sharp crack, and he curses loudly, throwing the handle down. Another laughs and offers to lend him his spare blade. For a price, of course. You chuckle, shaking your head. Even in the middle of toil, business never stops. Your arms burn, your back aches, and still you push on. Farming is a test of endurance, not speed. You've learned to pace yourself, to breathe steadily, to let the oxen do the heavy pulling while you guide. But the soil is stubborn today, clinging like clay always does after a damp night. You groan, muttering to yourself that maybe the scribes should come try this before telling you which days are favorable. Historians still argue whether Sumerian plows were efficient innovations or crude stopgaps. Some claim they revolutionized farming, while others point out they were heavy, awkward, and broke often. You don't need a historian to tell you the truth. You feel it in your shoulders. The plow is both blessing and curse. Without it, your harvest would be pitiful. With it, your muscles scream for mercy. At last, you stop for a moment, wiping your face again. The sun is higher now, glaring down mercilessly. Your son sits in the shade of a reed shelter you built at the edge of the field, sipping from a small jug of water. He waves at you, grinning. You shake your head, smile despite yourself, and return to the plow. The oxen pull forward, steady and relentless, and you follow, carving the earth into order. Furrow by furrow, the field begins to look ready for life, lines of soil waiting for the seeds you'll scatter later. And though your arms throb and your back protests, you can't help but feel a flicker of pride. This is the work that keeps your family alive, the work that binds you to the land, the work that, someday, your son will curse just as much as you do. For now, though, you lean into the plow again, grit your teeth, and keep moving. Because in Sumer, the soil waits for no one. The field stretches before you now. Rows of freshly carved furrows lying open like pages waiting for ink. The plow rests nearby, its wooden tip darkened from the damp soil, while the oxen munch lazily on a bundle of reeds you toss to them as a reward. Their tails flick in slow rhythm, swatting flies, perfectly content while you wipe sweat from your forehead and prepare for the next task. Plowing breaks the earth, but planting is what promises a future. You grab a sack of seed grain from the shaded reed shelter. It's heavy, bulging against the woven fibers, filled with barley kernels dried carefully after last year's harvest. Every handful you scatter today is both an investment and a gamble. Too shallow, and the birds will feast before the shoots appear. Too deep, and the seedlings will never see sunlight. Somewhere between those extremes lies survival. You sling the sack across your shoulder, take a step into the furrows, and begin. Your hand dips into the bag, scattering seed with an easy flick of the wrist. The kernels arc through the air, landing with tiny patters against the soil, bouncing once or twice before settling. The rhythm quickly takes over. Step, scatter. Step, scatter. Your son trots behind you, grinning, copying your motion with his smaller sack of seed. Of course, half his kernels land in clumps, 2 handfuls in one spot, none in the next. You sigh, but let him continue. Practice makes perfect. Besides, the birds will probably correct his mistakes soon enough. Above, a hawk circles lazily, riding the warm updrafts. You narrow your eyes at it. Hawks don't eat barley, true, but where there are hawks, there are flocks of smaller birds ready to descend on your seeds the moment you turn your back. Sure enough, a scatter of sparrows hops along the edge of the field, watching greedily. You stoop, grab a clod of dirt, and toss it their way. They scatter, chirping indignantly, only to regroup a few feet farther down. You mutter, "Greedy little scholars of free lunch." It's a mainstream fact Sumerian farmers fought constantly against pests. Birds, locusts, even mice could devastate a field before the seedlings had a chance. Temples employed whole squads of boys to clap reeds together, making noise to scare away flocks. Some families kept cats, small, scrappy animals brought in from Egypt and tamed just enough to keep rodents in check. Yours, sadly, prefers sleeping in the granary to chasing anything. You keep walking, scattering more grain. The sun presses down on your back now, hot and insistent. Sweat drips from your brow into the soil. The smell of earth lingers in your nose, damp, fertile, slightly sour. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks from the canal, as if blessing the work. You pause to stretch, rolling your shoulders. Your hands are already raw from plow handles, and now the constant motion of seeding adds a dull ache. You flex your fingers, shake them out, then keep moving. Your son skips ahead, flinging a whole handful of barley into the air like confetti. The kernels rain down in a messy pile. You groan, stomp over, and scoop some back into your sack. "If you keep feeding the sparrows like that," you mutter, "we'll be eating reeds for dinner." He laughs, unbothered, and sprints off again. You glance toward the canal, checking its level. Enough water lingers that, once the seedlings sprout, you'll be able to draw irrigation ditches easily. That's the next big step. But for now, the priority is just getting these seeds into the soil. You kneel, Press a clump of earth over a handful you scattered too shallow, patting it firm. The soil is warm and soft beneath your palm, comforting in its way. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some farmers swear by chanting softly while scattering seed, claiming the rhythm of words helps the barley take root. Your neighbor even insists certain phrases encourage faster growth, like telling the soil bedtime stories, but for plants. You've never noticed a difference, but sometimes you hum under your breath anyway. If nothing else, it keeps your mind steady, your movements even, and who knows, maybe barley likes lullabies. You work steadily across the field, the rows filling with scattered life. The oxen lift their heads occasionally to watch you, chewing in their slow, judgmental way. You point at them and joke, "If this harvest fails, I'm blaming you two." They blink, unimpressed. It's hard not to think about how fragile all of this is. One flood too strong, one drought too long, one swarm of insects, and all this careful scattering becomes wasted effort. You remember stories from just a few years back when the river stayed low all season and half the village went hungry. Historians still argue whether those droughts were natural or worsened by deforestation upstream. You just know that your belly ached that year and your children cried at night from hunger. The memory makes you scatter the grain more carefully, more prayerfully. Step, scatter, pat. Step, scatter, pat. The rhythm slows your thoughts, lulls you almost into a trance. The field begins to look different. Furrows darkened by seed, ridges lined with the promise of green shoots. From above, if anyone were flying like that hawk, the pattern would look neat, geometric, human-made against the wide floodplain. Civilization carved into dirt. A breeze rises, cool against your sweaty skin, carrying the smell of reeds and river water. It rustles through your tunic, whispering faint encouragement. For a moment, you close your eyes and imagine the barley already tall, swaying in this same wind. The thought steadies you. By midday, the sack grows lighter. Your shoulder aches from carrying it, your palm rough from reaching in over and over. The sun blazes, merciless, turning your tunic damp and sticky. You whistle sharply, and your son trots back, dust cloud rising behind him. Together you finish the last furrows, scattering the last handfuls, patting down the last clumps of soil. Then you both collapse onto the reed shelter's shade, panting, chests heaving. The oxen snort in the background, finished with their reeds and eyeing you as if to ask whether the work is finally over. You grin at your son, flicking a kernel from his hair. He laughs, curls up beside you, and promptly dozes off, his cheeks smudged with dust. You stretch out your sore arms, gaze at the wide, seeded field, and allow yourself a small smile. The hard part, plowing and sowing, is done for now. Ahead lies irrigation, weeding, guarding, harvesting. But for this moment at least, you can breathe, watch the sparrows circle overhead, and dream of the green shoots that will soon poke through the soil like promises kept. The field lies behind you now, seated and silent, but your work isn't finished, far from it. If sowing is a promise, irrigation is the oath you swear to keep it. Without water, the barley never breaks through the soil. And in Sumer, water isn't a gentle rain falling from the sky whenever you'd like. No, the heavens here are stingy, offering only a handful of storms each year. The real water flows through the veins of the land, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the canals men like you carve into the earth. You shoulder a shovel, rough-handled and worn smooth where countless palms have gripped it, and trudge toward the canal that runs along the field's edge. The oxen are tied up for rest, chewing cud and looking smug. Your son follows, carrying a smaller reed scoop, eager to help, though you know you'll end up fixing his crooked channels later. Still, better crooked water than none at all. The canal gleams faintly, carrying water the color of milk tea, thick with silt from upstream. Frogs croak along its banks, leaping away as you approach. Reeds sway in the breeze, whispering secrets about fish and insects hidden within. You crouch at the edge, dip your hand in, and feel the cool current sliding past your fingers. This is lifeblood, the river's gift. Without it, your barley is nothing but dry seed. You take your shovel and begin carving a narrow furrow from the canal into the field. The soil resists at first, clumping stubbornly, but soon the groove takes shape. Water trickles in, darkening the dirt, seeping along the channel you guide. Your son squeals in delight, splashing with his reed scoop to help the flow along. You laugh, shaking your head. He looks more like he's playing at a festival game than feeding a crop. It's a mainstream fact, the genius of Sumer wasn't just cities or writing, it was irrigation. With canals and dikes, entire communities coaxed the rivers into service, taming floods and feeding fields. Without those watery highways, Uruk, and Lagash would never have risen from mud huts into bustling cities. Yet taming rivers is no simple matter. Water gives, but it also destroys. Too much in the wrong season and fields drown. Too little and they wither. You widen the channel with careful strokes, ensuring the water spreads evenly across the furrows. Too much flow and the soil erodes. Too little and patches remain dry. The art is balance, patience, watching how the earth drinks and adjusting the flow. You plug part of the ditch with a clod of clay, then open another farther down. Slowly, the field begins to darken in patches, soaking up the river's gift. Your son, impatient, tries to dig his own side channel. Predictably, the water rushes too fast, washing away a whole row of seed. You groan, wade over, and block it with your foot. He frowns, muttering, "But the water liked my road better." You chuckle, tousle his hair, and tell him, "The water likes to run wild. It's our job to teach it manners." A dragonfly hovers nearby, wings flashing like green glass in the sun. You watch it for a moment, distracted, then return to work. One quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some elders claim dragonflies are spirits of drowned ancestors, guiding the water to where it should flow. You've never decided whether that's comforting or unsettling. Either way, you don't argue with the insect. If it wants to bless your furrows, you'll take it. By midday, the field glistens with dampness. The soil shines dark, footprints sinking slightly where you step. The barley seeds lie hidden, soaking in their first drink. You straighten, stretch your back, and wipe the sweat streaming down your temples. The sun beats mercilessly above, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Your son collapses onto the bank, trailing his fingers in the canal, humming tunelessly. You sit beside him, watching the current. The water carries bits of reed, fragments of mud, even the occasional fish struggling to swim upstream. You wonder briefly where that fish will end up, perhaps flopping into some farmer's furrow by mistake. It wouldn't be the strangest thing. People still tell stories of tiny fish appearing in barley rows, carried there by floodwater. Historians still argue whether such tales are myth or proof of ancient aquaculture. You'd just prefer they ended up in your cooking pot. The sound of rushing water is hypnotic, soothing. For a moment, you let yourself drift, eyes half closed, imagining the field weeks from now. Tiny green shoots piercing the surface, stretching toward the sun, rustling in the breeze. That thought carries you through the aches in your arms, the mud on your legs, the endless fatigue of bending and digging. This is the reward. You're building tomorrow with every drop of water you guide today. A shadow passes overhead. You glance up to see a flock of ibises wheeling in the sky, their long beaks glinting. They're heading toward the marshes, no doubt, where water is always plentiful. For a brief, jealous moment, you wish you were a bird, free of shovels, furrows, and aching muscles. But then you remember, birds don't brew beer. Advantage human. As afternoon stretches on, you adjust the dikes again, closing one, opening another, careful to share the water equally across the whole plot. Neighbors appear along their own canals, some cursing when the flow runs thin, others waving in triumph when theirs overflows. A few disputes break out, accusations that one family stole more water than allotted. You pretend not to hear, though you know tomorrow the elders will probably gather to scold the guilty. Water, after all, is wealth, and wealth, even in mud, inspires quarrels. By the time you finish, your field looks different, darkened, damp, alive with the promise of growth. The oxen low softly in the distance, sensing the end of labor. You sit once more on the bank, splash cool water onto your face, and drink deeply from a jug. The taste is earthy, slightly gritty, but refreshing nonetheless. Your son slurps noisily beside you, dribbling down his chin. You laugh, wipe his mouth, and lean back, letting the breeze dry your skin. The day's work is only half done, but for now, the seeds are fed, the soil is satisfied, and the river's voice murmurs approval in your ears. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound lull you. Water, soil, sun, the eternal triangle of Sumer. You've done your part to keep the balance, at least for today. Tomorrow will bring weeds, birds, quarrels, and more sweat. But tonight, when you finally lie down, you'll remember the shimmer of damp furrows in the sun, and the way the water obeyed your hand, if only for a little while. The sun has climbed higher, and the field hums quietly with latent energy, the barley seeds drinking in every drop of the canal water. Your son dozes under the reed shelter, a fine layer of dust and sweat covering his small frame, and even the oxen have retreated to the shade near the pen, tails flicking lazily as if they too understand the pause between labors. You stand at the edge of the field, surveying your work with a quiet pride. Each furrow, each seed is a tiny triumph, though your arms and back protest in no uncertain terms. It's time to turn your attention to another crucial task, fertilizing the field. Sumerian farmers don't rely solely on water and seed. The soil demands nutrients, and manure is the magic dust that keeps the land productive. You fetch a small pile from the storage heap, mostly cow and ox dung mixed with straw. The smell is strong, earthy, and slightly sour, the kind of odor that makes newcomers wrinkle their noses. You, however, inhale deeply, a ritual of reassurance. This is life. This is growth. You scatter the manure carefully along the furrows, mixing it lightly with your hands and a small rake. The scent of the soil rises, richer now, promising fertility and protection against the cruel sting of a poor harvest. Your son stirs, blinking at the pungent aroma. "It smells alive," he says softly. You nod, patting the mixture down with your hands. Exactly. That's how the land talks back to us. Historians still argue whether Sumerians fully understood nutrient cycles or whether they relied mostly on observation and inherited practice. For you, the science is less abstract and more visceral. You've seen fields treated with care thrive year after year, while neglected plots shrivel under the sun or wash away in floods. You trust your instincts, but the knowledge passed down from father to son, scribe to farmer, is invaluable. A curious fact drifts into your mind. Some families reportedly used small fish, mashed and mixed with the soil, as a fertilizer for particularly stubborn patches. The idea makes you wrinkle your nose, though you suspect it worked surprisingly well. You imagine tossing a small carp into a furrow, the seeds sprouting faster while the family dog looks on in confusion. You shake your head and decide that cow and ox dung, though less exotic, will suffice for today. The breeze rises again, carrying the smell of river silt and distant cooking fires. You pause, leaning on your rake, and notice a neighbor walking along the edge of their field. They nod at you, calling out that the water flow is steady, the barley likely to thrive. You nod back, acknowledging their approval without speaking. Words are secondary here. The land communicates, in texture, in moisture, in the slow bending of stalks. Your son climbs to his feet, brushing dust from his tunic. He tries to lift the rake with you, but the weight is more than he can manage. You hand him a small bundle of straw to scatter along the edges, turning it into a game. He runs down the furrows, tossing it like confetti, laughing with abandon. You can't help but smile, watching him turn labor into play, a fleeting moment before he's tethered to responsibility like the rest of us. Meanwhile, the oxen shift in the shade, eyes half closed. They occasionally flick a fly from their flanks, but otherwise remain indifferent to your ministrations. You glance at them and mutter, "If only you two could handle weeds too." A low grunt comes in response, or maybe it's a coincidence, but you take it as agreement. As you work, the sun climbs relentlessly, turning the field into a shimmer of heat. Sweat runs down your back, mixing with the dust clinging to your skin. Still, your movements are steady, rhythmic. Rake, pat, scatter, repeat. The labor is quiet now, almost meditative, the kind that makes the minutes stretch into hours without notice. You think of the generations of farmers who have stood in this same sun, hands in the same soil, knowing that survival depends on diligence and patience. Quirky rumors you've heard over the years float through your mind. One elder swore that certain sections of the field respond better if you talk to them while fertilizing. An incantation, or maybe just superstition, but you mumble softly anyway. The words are nonsense, really, but they keep your rhythm consistent and your mind focused. Perhaps you think the barley enjoys a little attention. By late morning, the furrows are covered, the soil enriched, and ready to rest briefly before the next phase of tending. You step back, wiping your hands on your tunic, and take a long, satisfying look at the land. It's a patchwork of brown lines, damp soil, and earthy richness, waiting for green life to push through. You feel a moment of quiet triumph. The barley will grow if the river behaves, if the sun is kind, if the birds don't get greedy. And even if it doesn't, you've done your part. The sound of a distant bell reaches your ears. The temple calling for midday offerings, or perhaps just a reminder of the city's pulse beyond the fields. The rhythm of life continues, but for now you can linger in the quiet of your labor. The wind carries the soft croaks of frogs, the rustle of reeds, and the occasional whistle of a hawk circling above. It's a soundtrack of Sumar itself, blending the natural world with human toil. You crouch beside a furrow, pressing a small handful of soil between your fingers, feeling the warmth, the moisture, the fertility. This is a tactile connection to survival, to history, to the generations before you who tilled the same land, faced the same floods, and depended on the same stubborn river. Historians still argue whether Sumerian farmers saw themselves as mere laborers or as stewards of the land. You know, without any debate, that you are both. Finally, you stretch, letting your shoulders loosen, muscles releasing after hours of bending and scattering. The oxen shift again, lowing softly, and your son settles back in the shade. You stand fully upright, surveying the field once more. Rows of furrows, enriched with soil, glistening slightly with irrigation water. This is your craft, your labor, your legacy. A quiet satisfaction settles in your chest, tempered by the awareness that this is just the middle of the season. The barley will need attention, weeds will creep in, pests will attempt their thefts, and the river will demand careful management. Yet, for this hour, the work is done. The field waits, patient and silent, ready for what comes next. The midday sun climbs higher, casting short, sharp shadows across your neatly furrowed field. Your son has dozed off again, sprawled across the reed shelter, and even the oxen are now languid, heads low, chewing cud with quiet indifference. The air is thick with the smell of warm soil, sun-baked reeds, and the faint tang of the canal water. You take a deep breath, letting the scents settle in your lungs. It's the smell of life, of labor, of the endless cycle that defines existence here in Sumer. You stretch your aching back and glance at the plow resting against the edge of the field. It will need attention again soon. The wooden blade is sturdy, but the sun cracks everything over time, and the handles bear the scars of countless hours. Tools are extensions of the body here, as necessary as hands or arms, and neglecting them can turn a small inconvenience into a season-ending disaster. You run your fingers along the polished wood, checking for splits, and nod. It should hold for now. Today, though, it's time to consider another layer of the field's needs: weeds. They're quiet, insidious, and often overlooked until they strangle young shoots. You kneel beside a row, examining the soil. Tiny green sprouts, barley perhaps, or maybe something unwanted. It's hard to tell in the early stages. Your hands brush against the tender shoots as you carefully pluck any intruders, discarding them into a pile at the field's edge. Weeding is repetitive, almost meditative. Your back aches, fingers ache, but there's a rhythm to it. Spot the intruder, remove, place aside, move to the next. The field becomes a living puzzle, each section demanding attention. One misplaced weed can spread quickly if ignored, stealing water and nutrients. Your eyes scan continuously, and you bend, kneel, stretch, and sometimes groan under the sun's relentless gaze. A curious fact enters your thoughts. Sumerians often used shallow flooding as a secondary way to control weeds, letting the water drown young plants that weren't the barley you planted. Ingenious and messy in equal measure. You can almost imagine some farmer centuries later describing it to a scribe. "We drowned the wrong children of the earth." You chuckle softly at the mental image, though your hands remain busy. Your son, now awake, toddles beside you, plucking weeds here and there. He drops more than he removes, but the effort is endearing. You glance at him, brushing dust from his tunic. "Better than nothing," you say, smiling. He beams, clearly proud to have a role, however small, in tending the field. You feel a flicker of warmth in your chest. Pride, yes, but also the comforting weight of continuity. You are teaching him not just farming, but patience, attention, and the rhythm of life itself. The oxen shift in the background, lowing softly, restless after their short rest. You glance up, imagining the next phase, perhaps plowing another strip, or dragging a harrow to aerate the soil further. But for now, the weeds take priority. The repetition, though exhausting, becomes hypnotic. Step forward, kneel, pluck, place, repeat. Your mind wanders gently, dreaming of green fields, growing barley, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from shaping the land with your own hands. One quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Some farmers whisper that weeds have personalities, mischievous spirits that enjoy growing in forbidden rows, or mocking the farmer who planted barley. You scoff softly. Perhaps they do, but if so, your hands are faster than their mischief. You tug another stubborn sprout from the soil and toss it into the pile. Take that, impish greenery. Historians still argue whether Sumerian farmers viewed weeds strictly as nuisance plants, or whether some might have ceremonial or medicinal value. To you, the weeds are a battle, not philosophy. Yet occasionally, you glance at a stubborn sprig and wonder, maybe it's not entirely useless. Maybe one day someone will use it for healing or dye. Perhaps even the sparrows eat them in secret, savoring the taste you don't. The sun climbs even higher, now blazing in a cloudless sky. Sweat drips from your temples, streaking the dust on your cheeks. You pause, wiping your face with a sleeve, and glance across the field. Rows of barley seedlings stand straight, darkened by the morning irrigation, punctuated by occasional gaps and misaligned sprouts. The work is endless, yes, but there's undeniable satisfaction in shaping life out of earth, water, and labor. Your son calls out suddenly, holding up a particularly thick sprout. "Baba, is this one barley?" You peer closely. "Not yet," you reply, smiling. "It's a sneaky weed, pretending to be family. We must be careful." He frowns, examines it seriously, then nods, accepting the judgment. Teaching moments come in strange forms out here, often between sweat, dirt, and laughter. Hours pass in this rhythm. Step, bend, pluck, place, glance at the sun, repeat. Birds call from the canal edges, a frog leaps, and the occasional breeze lifts dust into shimmering swirls. The field hums with subtle life, the promise of harvest hidden beneath the brown and green surface. You glance at the oxen again. Their eyes follow you lazily, ears flicking, tail swishing. They have no concept of weeds, only that you disturb their rest. You mutter, "One day you'll understand the importance of tiny intruders," but they ignore you. Finally, you stand upright, stretch your arms high, and take in the field in its entirety. Rows are largely cleared, the weeds diminished, and the barley seedlings free to grow in peace, for now. Your hands ache, your back protests, your shoulders feel the burn from hours of labor, but the work is visible, tangible. You inhale deeply, smelling earth, sweat, water, and sun-warmed reeds. This is life, rough and demanding, yet quiet and fulfilling in its own relentless way. The day continues to blaze, but a subtle satisfaction hums in your chest. The field is tended, the seedlings are safe, and the rhythm of work has lulled you into a meditative calm. There's pride in the labor, joy in small victories, and a quiet humor in the endless stubbornness of both earth and oxen. You crouch once more, letting your hands brush over the dark soil, feeling the warmth and weight of it. The barley is yours for now, fragile but alive, guided by every careful action of your hands and your mind. This is the heartbeat of civilization, small, patient, and unwavering. One season, one furrow, one seed at a time. The afternoon stretches on, and the bakery settles into a steady hum. The rhythm of shaping, stamping, sliding loaves into the oven has become almost hypnotic. Your arms ache less from strain, and more from the repetitive comfort of familiarity. You've learned to anticipate the dough's resistance, to feel when it's ready for shaping, to press just so when stamping, to leave a crisp, clean emblem. It's a quiet mastery, and in this moment, it feels almost meditative. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow and glance toward the open doorway. The streets outside are slower now, the midday rush fading into a lull before the evening buyers arrive. Children chase each other with bare feet across sun-warmed cobblestones, their laughter carrying faintly into the bakery. A cart trundles past, overloaded with bundles of fresh herbs. The smell of rosemary and thyme mingles with your bread's yeasty aroma, creating a surprisingly pleasant combination. You inhale deeply, savoring the small sensory pleasure before returning to the dough. Historians still argue whether bakeries had specialized shifts or whether the same bakers labored from dawn until dusk. But in your case, the schedule has always been fluid. The work ebbs and flows with the city's appetite, the mill's pace, and the oven's temper. There are moments like this lull when time seems to stretch, and you can appreciate the craft in front of you. But you know it won't last. Soon the afternoon orders will arrive, the city will stir again, and a relentless cycle will resume. You grab a new lump of dough, the texture springy and warm from resting under cloths. Kneading it is like conversing with a stubborn friend. It resists, stretches, sometimes sticks, but eventually responds if treated with patience. You fold it, press it, and shape it into a perfect round, watching the surface smooth under your fingers. It's a small triumph, one among many, but these victories build the backbone of the day. The oven demands attention again, its mouth glowing like molten gold, reminding you that warmth is both friend and adversary. Too hot, and the crusts blacken. Too cool, and the loaves come out pale and dense. You adjust the embers, rotate the racks, and slide the next batch in with practiced ease. Each loaf, each batch, is a negotiation with fire and time, a delicate balance between patience and action. Outside, the sounds of the city continue to pulse. A street performer's flute carries faintly through the air, competing with a butcher calling out the day's specials. Someone is hammering at a distant forge, sparks flying, metal singing. The hum of life, constant and layered, contrasts with the precise, controlled chaos of the bakery. You feel both tethered to it and separate, a part of Rome's machinery, but also observing it from within the sanctuary of flour and fire. A neighbor appears at the doorway, asking for a loaf reserved earlier. You hand it over, noting how carefully she cradles it, as if protecting something fragile. It strikes you how intimate bread is, public yet personal, sustenance yet comfort. You watch her leave, noting the tiny sway of her body as she navigates the bustling streets, and remind yourself that every loaf has a life beyond your hands. And here's a quirky tidbit that makes you smile while kneading. Some Roman bakers would hide small charms or trinkets in festival loaves as surprises, gifts for lucky buyers. Perhaps a small coin, a tiny figurine, or a piece of colored clay, tokens of luck or fortune. Imagine a child biting into bread and discovering a tiny treasure hidden inside. Today, your loaves are all plain, but the thought lingers, a small reminder that even the humblest task can harbor a little magic. You glance toward the oven again, the heat radiating in waves that make the air shimmer. The loaves inside are puffing, crusting, releasing bursts of steam as they bake. You adjust one slightly, tap another to check its hollow sound, and lift a batch carefully to the cooling racks. Each loaf seems to have its own personality, a subtle difference in shape, rise, and aroma, and you treat them accordingly. This is labor, yes, but also art in motion. Your coworkers move with synchronized efficiency. One sweeps the floor, another prepares the next tray of dough, a third takes tally of baked loaves versus orders. The atmosphere is noisy yet focused, a symphony of activity where every action matters. You catch a fleeting glimpse of yourself in the dusty window, flour streaked across your forehead, tunic clinging to your back, hands coated in white. You look the part of a Roman baker, a figure both humble and essential, and you feel a quiet pride. Historians still argue whether bakers were considered skilled artisans or mere laborers in the social hierarchy. But standing here, you don't think much about social status. Your worth is measured in loaves, in the nourishment you provide, in the city that relies on your steady hands. It is a satisfaction that transcends titles and rankings, a simple human achievement. Feed people well, and they survive another day. The lull continues, and you take a moment to observe the dough resting under cloths, rising gently in anticipation of the next round. Its surface glistens slightly, and the faint scent of yeast is comforting. You stretch your fingers, flexing tired muscles, and allow yourself a few seconds of stillness. Outside, the city hums with life, and inside, the bakery breathes, warm and fragrant, a sanctuary amidst chaos. A baker nearby cracks a joke about how the dough might revolt if left unattended, and you chuckle softly. The humor is small, gentle, and necessary. A reminder that even in the relentless cycle of bread making, there's room for levity. Flour-dusted hands, tired bodies, and warm loaves, they all deserve a moment of laughter now and then. The afternoon continues, steady and measured. Each loaf you shape, stamp, and slide into the oven is another small victory, another contribution to the city's pulse. The sun shifts in the sky, shadows lengthen across the bakery floor, and still the rhythm holds. Knead, fold, stamp, slide. Knead, fold, stamp, slide. The motion becomes meditation, exhaustion giving way to a trance-like focus, the world outside softening into background noise. Even as the day wears on, the bakery remains the center of a living cycle, both predictable and alive. Dough rises, loaves bake, bread feeds the people. And through it all, you are present. Hands in flour, eyes on the oven, ears attuned to the hum of the city and the whispers of the dough. Rome depends on you in ways it cannot articulate, and in this quiet, intense labor, you understand your own value in a way that no coin or title could ever measure. The sun has begun its slow descent, casting long, warm shadows across the bakery floor. The air is thick with heat, flour, and the comforting aroma of countless loaves baking in the oven. It's that time of day when the rhythm shifts, less frantic than the morning rush, less methodical than the midday lull. The afternoon gives way to evening, and you feel the subtle tension of anticipation. There will be buyers soon, and the city's appetite is never satisfied. You knead the next batch of dough, your hands slipping into the familiar folds, stretching, pressing, and folding again. The texture is slightly different from the morning's batch, perhaps because the flour has absorbed more water from the humid air, or because the yeast is acting with a more vigorous energy now. You adjust instinctively, folding a little more firmly here, pressing a little more gently there. Each batch is a living thing, responding to your touch, your rhythm, and the ambient warmth of the bakery. Historians still argue whether Roman bakers followed strict recipes or relied mostly on intuition and experience. From your perspective, it's definitely intuition. Too much water and the dough is sticky and unmanageable. Too little and it won't rise properly. The perfect loaf requires observation, experience, and a kind of quiet patience that you've cultivated over years of kneading. There's artistry in repetition, even when the work is sweaty, dusty, and exhausting. You stamp each loaf with the wooden emblem, your hands moving in practiced arcs. Press, lift, and the mark is left, a subtle signature of your labor. You step back occasionally, glancing at the rows of shaped dough awaiting the oven. The sight is satisfying, neat domes lined up in geometric precision, promising sustenance and warmth to anyone who will take them. It's easy to forget, amidst the rush, that bread is more than food. It's comfort, security, and a small daily miracle. Outside, the city hums with life. The afternoon heat softens into a gentle warmth. The streets populated with vendors closing stalls, children chasing one another in the waning sunlight, and travelers arriving from distant districts. A cart laden with figs rattles past, their sweet aroma mingling oddly with your bread. A butcher shouts about cuts of meat for the evening meal, and the faint tang of garum drifts from a nearby tavern. The smells overlap, creating a mosaic of the city's daily rhythm. A neighbor steps inside to buy a loaf, carrying a small child on her hip. The child's eyes widen as the warm, fragrant bread is handed over. You can't help but smile. Moments like this make the labor worthwhile. Bread isn't just sustenance, it's joy, ritual, and connection. The woman thanks you, her voice low, appreciative, almost reverent. In a city this bustling, gratitude feels rare, but it lands on you gently, like a soft feather brushing across the day's exhaustion. And here's a quirky tidbit that always makes you chuckle quietly while shaping. Some Roman bakers would hide small charms or figurines in festival loaves. Imagine a child biting into a loaf and discovering a tiny token tucked inside, a private treasure in the midst of daily routine. Your loaves today are plain, sturdy, and unembellished, but you think of those charms and let a small smile form. Even the simplest labor can harbor small magic. The oven demands attention once more. You slide a batch in carefully, adjusting positions to ensure even baking. The fire crackles, a living partner in your work, unpredictable yet loyal. You tap the loaves in rhythm, checking for hollow sounds, watching for the perfect golden brown crust. Each loaf is a small negotiation with the flames, a silent conversation between human hands and elemental heat. A coworker comes to your side, dusting the counter with flour, his movements precise, almost ceremonial. You exchange a nod, a brief acknowledgement of shared effort. The bakery is a stage of simultaneous motion, kneading, stamping, sliding, tallying, cleaning, and each motion has its place. Even the smallest gesture matters. Historians still debate the social standing of bakers in Roman society. Some suggest that, despite their essential role, bakers were considered lowly, mere laborers in the eyes of elites. Others argue that the skill required, coupled with control over vital food supplies, elevated certain bakers into positions of influence. Standing here, amid flour and fire, you sense the truth lies somewhere in between. You are both indispensable and invisible, shaping the city's sustenance while rarely acknowledged for it. The afternoon light softens, turning the bakery walls a gentle amber. You step back briefly, hands on hips, watching the loaves puffing in the oven. The warmth radiates outward, mingling with the dust motes dancing lazily in the sunlight. You flex tired muscles, feeling the familiar ache of labor, and remind yourself of the quiet satisfaction in this craft. Every loaf leaving your hands feeds Rome. Every loaf matters. The city outside is a living backdrop. Children chase shadows across the cobblestones. A street performer tunes a small lyre, the notes rising and falling with the afternoon breeze. Vendors call out final bargains before closing their stalls. The smell of fresh produce, roasted meats, and fermented sauces blends with your bread into an olfactory portrait of the city. You take a breath, savoring it before turning back to the dough, knowing the rhythm must continue. You knead, fold, and shape, the movements becoming almost meditative, a soft mantra repeated with care. The stamped loaves are lined up, awaiting the oven. You glance at the clock, noting that evening approaches. Soon, another wave of buyers will arrive, hungry and eager. But for now, there is quiet. The oven hums, the dough rises, and the bakery seems to exhale in the fading sunlight. A soft chuckle escapes you as a coworker jokes about the dough plotting its escape from the bench. Laughter bubbles through the warm, flour-dusted air. Small moments like these remind you that even in relentless labor, there's room for levity, for companionship, for human connection amidst the dough and fire. The fire roars faintly, the oven's glow steady, and the aroma of baking bread fills every corner. You knead, stamp, and slide, each motion a blend of instinct, experience, and care. Outside, Rome continues its bustling life, unaware of the delicate dance inside. But within the bakery, you and your coworkers are the heartbeat of sustenance, quietly shaping loaves that feed the city and, in turn, the empire itself. The late afternoon sun continues its slow descent, casting a golden glow over your field. Shadows stretch long across the furrows, and the damp earth reflects the warm light, darkened with life and promise. You stand at the edge of the field, wiping the sweat and dust from your brow, surveying your labor. The barley seedlings are now fully soaked from the earlier irrigation, enriched with the manure you scattered, and for the moment, the weeds have been subdued. The lattice fence you built humbly guards the edges, and you can almost imagine tiny clay soldiers standing sentinel at the corners. Your son has dozed again under the reed shelter, exhausted from his day's help, though a faint smile lingers on his lips as he dreams. The oxen lie nearby, chewing cud, tails flicking in rhythm with the breeze. It's quiet now, save for the soft murmur of the canal water and the occasional bird calling from the marshes. You take a deep breath, letting the sense of river silt, earth, and distant cooking fires fill your senses. For a fleeting moment, you can pretend the world has paused, that nothing exists beyond this small patch of life you have coaxed from the soil. But the day is not over yet. The barley must be tended, and one of the most crucial tasks remains, guarding the seedlings against pests and the unpredictable whims of nature. You retrieve a small basket of repurposed reeds and set about making makeshift scare devices. Simple, crude by any standard, but they work if placed carefully. A few dangling reeds that catch the wind, a small clay figurine here and there, perhaps a string of tiny bones or shells that rabble when a breeze moves through them. The field becomes dotted with these small guardians, a patchwork of motion and noise designed to keep hungry eyes away. Historians still argue whether these methods were primarily practical or symbolic. Some believe Sumerian farmers relied on these devices because superstition reinforced diligence, ensuring that every inch of the field received attention. Others insist the motion and noise genuinely deterred birds and animals. You don't need to settle the debate, you've seen them work, at least enough to keep the majority of sparrows and doves at bay. You crouch to inspect a furrow, brushing soil away from a few seedlings to ensure they aren't smothered by residual clumps of dirt or stray weeds. Your fingers are sticky with mud, warm from the afternoon sun, and you flex them gently to relieve the tension. The tactile sensation is comforting, grounding. Every furrow you touch, every seed you check, every protective reed you plant is a small act of stewardship. You guide life with patient hands, and the soil responds, receptive yet demanding. A quirky tidbit enters your mind. Some families claim that hanging shiny bits of pottery on fences or dangling reeds attracts water spirits to the field. It seems fanciful, yet a sudden glint in the sun catches your eye from a broken shard at the fence's edge, and you chuckle. Perhaps it works, or perhaps it's just another reason for you to notice every detail of your field. Either way, the barley benefits from your attention, and that's what matters. Your son stirs, blinking sleepily, and wanders over to inspect one of the small scare devices. He pokes at a dangling reed, then laughs when it twirls in the wind, rattling softly. "Baba, it's alive!" he exclaims, eyes wide. You smile, crouching beside him to adjust it so it spins more freely. "Alive enough to scare the birds, I hope," you reply. He nods solemnly, understanding in his own childlike way that life is a delicate balance between work and wonder. The oxen shift, rising slowly to their feet, stretching their legs and flicking tails to chase flies. You mutter softly, half to yourself, half to them. Your turn soon, but for now, watch and rest. One of them snorts, as if in reply, and settles back down again. They are reliable companions, steady if occasionally obstinate, and their presence is a comfort in the long hours of toil. You take a slow walk along the furrows, inspecting each channel of water, each ridge of soil, each tiny green shoot breaking the surface. The sun, now lower in the sky, casts long shadows that make the field appear to ripple with life. You pause occasionally, letting the breeze cool your sun-warmed skin, listening to the soft rustle of reeds, the distant murmur of the river, and the occasional croak of a frog hiding in the canal. These small sounds, mundane and persistent, are the soundtrack of your labor, the gentle rhythm of life in Sumer. A mainstream fact floats into your thoughts. The Sumerians were meticulous observers of their environment, relying on careful record-keeping, observation, and inherited knowledge to maintain their fields. From the placement of canals to the timing of irrigation and the scattering of seed, every action was deliberate. And while modern scholars debate whether this arose from necessity or ingenuity, you know that in practice it is both. You rely on precision, instinct, and patience in equal measure. Your hands ache from the repetitive motions, but your mind is alert, observing patterns, predicting trouble spots, and making adjustments as needed. Step, check, adjust, repeat. There's a quiet satisfaction in this repetition, a meditative quality to bending low, feeling the soil, and guiding life one careful movement at a time. You glance down at a tiny barley sprout just breaking the surface and smile. It's small, almost imperceptible, yet it is a triumph, proof that your labor has taken root, literally and figuratively. You glance down at a tiny barley sprout just breaking the surface and smile. It's small, almost imperceptible, yet it is a triumph, proof that your labor has taken root, literally and figuratively. Historians still argue whether Sumerian farmers considered themselves stewards of the land or simply servants of necessity. You think it is both, a dual responsibility, to feed your family and to respect the life that grows beneath your hands. Each adjustment to a furrow, each scare device placed, each careful inspection of seedlings is a small conversation with the land itself. The soil responds, the water flows, and the barley, hidden but thriving, rewards your attentiveness. The breeze picks up again, stirring the reeds and rattling your makeshift scare devices. You pause, listening to the subtle clatter, imagining the tiny guardians shaking in the wind. Birds eye the field from a distance, hesitant to intrude, while the seedlings drink deeply in the fading warmth. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the ache of labor in your arms, back, and legs, but also the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Your son yawns, stretching beside the reed shelter, eyes half-lidded. You stand, brushing dust from your tunic, and glance once more across the field. Furrows lie neat and dark, water trickles steadily. Seedlings are safe, and the latticed fence stands guard. The day's labor has left its mark, subtle but undeniable. The barley will grow if the elements remain kind, if pests are limited, and if tomorrow brings more of your careful attention. Step by step, furrow by furrow, you've guided life into the earth, coaxed water to flow, fended off mischief, and created the conditions for survival. This is the rhythm of Sumer, the heartbeat of human labor intertwined with the pulse of the land itself. You pause one last time, inhaling deeply, letting the sense of soil, river, and sun wash over you before settling into a slow, measured exhale. The sun has dipped lower now, softening the harsh glare of the afternoon into a warm golden haze. Shadows stretch lazily across the furrows, long and slender, as if the earth itself is reaching to embrace the fading light. You stand at the edge of the field, surveying the labor of the day with quiet satisfaction. The barley seedlings are safe, the irrigation channels flowing steadily, and the lattice fence stands firm against potential intruders. Even the small clay and reed guardians seem to glow in the slanting sunlight, their silent watchfulness adding a sense of calm to the field. Your son stirs again, blinking sleepily at the warm glow and the gentle breeze. He stands and wanders toward one of the irrigation channels, dipping his fingers in the cool water and letting droplets spill over his hands. You watch him for a moment, smiling softly. Children have an uncanny ability to find wonder in the smallest details, and in his hands, the river is both a toy and a teacher. You kneel beside him, guiding his small movements to ensure he doesn't disrupt the delicate flow. Patience, you murmur. The water teaches more than just wet soil. It teaches balance, timing, and the value of care. The oxen, now fully awake, stretch their legs and shift in the shade. Their steady presence is reassuring, a reminder of the quiet partnership between human and animal in the rhythms of farm life. You mutter softly, half to them and half to yourself. One day soon, you'll pull the plow again, but for now, rest. One of them snorts, as if acknowledging your words, then settles back down with a flick of its tail. You return to the furrows, inspecting the irrigation channels, checking the soil, and adjusting small obstructions. The water trickles smoothly along the lines, nourishing the barley seeds hidden beneath the surface. Your hands are sticky with mud, warmed by the sun, and you flex your fingers gently to relieve the tension. There is a comforting rhythm in the repetitive motions. Bend, check, adjust, move along. Each careful adjustment is a dialogue with the land, an acknowledgement of its needs and limits. Some elders claim that certain sections of the field grow better when the wind blows in a particular direction. You laugh softly, imagining the barley negotiating with the breeze over how tall it should grow. Perhaps there is truth in it, or perhaps it is simply an excuse for meticulous observation. Either way, the seedlings are responding to your attention, and that is enough. Historians still debate whether Sumerian farmers relied more on superstition or observation, but you know that in practice, it is a blend of both. You've learned to read the soil, the water, and the plants, but a touch of ritual or whimsy never hurts. The small clay figures atop the fence, the gentle words murmured to the river, the humming as you walk along the furrows, they all form part of the careful orchestration that turns soil into sustenance. You crouch beside a young shoot, brushing away a tiny clump of dirt that threatens to smother it. The barley is tender but resilient, a fragile life held in check by your hands and guidance. Step by step, furrow by furrow, you've coaxed growth from the earth, and the satisfaction of seeing your labor bear fruit is profound. Each seed is a triumph, each furrow a testament to patience and care. Your son wanders along the edge of the field, inspecting the lattice fence. He pokes at a dangling reed, watching it twirl in the wind, and giggles. "It's alive, Baba!" he exclaims. You kneel beside him, adjusting the reed so it spins more freely. "Alive enough to scare the birds, I hope," you reply, smiling. The wind picks up, rattling the small guardians, and you can almost hear the tiny figures laughing with mischief. The field hums quietly with life. The subtle stirrings of seedlings beneath the soil, the gentle trickle of water, the rustle of reeds, and the distant calls of birds. It is a rhythm that lulls the mind, blending effort and observation into a seamless meditation. You walk slowly along the furrows, hands brushing over the warm soil, ensuring that every seed has space to grow and that every channel carries water evenly. A mainstream fact enters your thoughts. The Sumerians meticulously observed their environment, tracking rainfall, river flow, and soil conditions to maintain their fields. From canal placement to irrigation timing and soil enrichment, every action was deliberate. You rely on similar principles now, guided by experience, observation, and inherited knowledge. It is labor, yes, but it is also a form of communication with the land. By evening, the sun has softened to a gentle amber, casting a calming glow across the field. Shadows mingle with the warm light, creating a tapestry of dark and gold. You pause, taking in the sight: the neat furrows, the flowing water, the protective fence, and the hidden green shoots beneath the surface. There is satisfaction here, quiet but profound, in knowing that the seeds you planted, watered, and protected are now set on the path to life. Your son yawns and settles back under the reed shelter, exhausted but content. The oxen shift again, their tails flicking lazily. You take a deep breath, letting the cool evening air wash over your sweat-warmed skin. The day's labor has been long, your body aches, but there is an unmistakable joy in the quiet order you have created. The field rests in balance, a delicate ecosystem nurtured by patience, care, and steady attention. Historians still argue whether Sumerian farmers viewed themselves as stewards of the land or merely servants of necessity. You know it is both. You tend the earth to feed your family and, in doing so, cultivate a connection with the rhythms of life itself. Step by step, furrow by furrow, you have guided growth, balanced water, protected seedlings, and nurtured life. And in this moment, as the sun dips toward the horizon, you can feel the weight and beauty of that responsibility. The evening breeze picks up, rustling the reeds, rattling the small scare devices, and carrying the distant sound of village life. You pause one last time, walking slowly along the furrows, hands brushing over the warm soil, ensuring the irrigation channels remain steady. The barley will continue to grow under your care, and you will return tomorrow to tend it further. But for now, the field is calm, the water flows evenly, and the seedlings are safe. You allow yourself a moment of quiet satisfaction before moving toward the shelter to rest. The final hours of the day settle like a soft, warm blanket over the bakery. Outside, the streets of Rome have quieted, the afternoon bustle fading into gentle murmurs of evening. The city exhales, and the distant clatter of carts and laughter of children slowly vanish. Inside, the bakery holds its own steady rhythm, ovens glowing, loaves cooling on racks, and the comforting scent of yeast and baked bread lingering like a gentle whisper. You lean against the counter for a moment, letting the warmth seep into your shoulders and back, the ache from the long day beginning to soften. Your hands return to the final batch of dough. It is pliant, soft, and cooperative, responding to each press and fold with a subtle elasticity that feels almost like a conversation. The tactile rhythm of kneading, the press, fold, turn, repeat, grounds you. Even as exhaustion hums at the edges of your awareness, the dough pulls you forward, urging patience, precision, and care. Each loaf in this last batch is a culmination of the day's labor, sweat, focus, and attention etched into every curve and rise. Historians still argue whether Roman bakers worked past sundown regularly, or if evenings were reserved for winding down and socializing. In your experience, the day extends as long as the city demands. Though the streets outside are quieter, the bakery itself is alive, a vessel containing the final pulse of labor. You slide tray after tray into the oven, adjusting their positions so the heat distributes evenly, coaxing each loaf toward perfect golden brown crusts. A coworker passes, carrying a small, slightly misshapen loaf. You exchange a weary smile. Even imperfect bread has value. It will feed someone tonight, provide warmth and sustenance. That thought steadies you as you continue shaping the remaining dough. Your motions have become almost meditative. The pressing, folding, and rolling of the dough is both labor and a quiet, calming rhythm that soothes your mind as much as your hands. Outside, the city's evening light softens into deep amber and muted rose, shadows stretching across cobblestones. A gentle breeze drifts through the open doorway, carrying hints of roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall, the faint tang of garum, and the distant notes of a lyre played by a street musician winding down for the night. You pause to inhale, letting the mixture of scents and sounds wash over you, a reminder that life continues beyond the bakery, yet is connected to it in a delicate, invisible web. And here's a quirky tidbit that brings a quiet smile. Some Roman bakers would carve small patterns or tiny letters into loaves for private messages or secret amusements. Imagine a family discovering a loaf stamped with a tiny heart or the initial of a loved one. A playful hidden meaning baked right into everyday sustenance. Today, your loaves are uniform, practical, essential. Yet the thought of such whimsical traditions adds a faint layer of charm to your evening labor. The ovens hum steadily, each tray of loaves responding to the heat like obedient children. You tap crusts gently, listening for the hollow sound that marks readiness, pulling each batch with care and placing them on the cooling racks. The bakery is now quiet in its own way. The roaring clamor of the morning has faded, replaced by a serene, focused stillness, punctuated by occasional hisses from the ovens. Your body aches from hours of bending, kneading, lifting, and shaping, but the fatigue carries a quiet satisfaction, a tangible proof of a day well spent. Historians still debate whether bakers were socially elevated because of their skill, or remained laborers despite their essential role. From your vantage point, titles matter little. The worth of the day is in the loaves, the warmth, and the quiet rhythm of work. Every movement, every handprint in the dough, every golden brown loaf carries a measure of your presence and care. The city may not notice your effort explicitly, but it survives, thrives, and rests nourished because of it. You take a slow breath, glancing around the bakery. The racks are lined neatly with loaves, some small, some large, each with a crisp crust and soft interior ready for consumption. You stretch your arms overhead, shoulders popping, spine arching in relief. The day's labor has been relentless, yet fulfilling. There is a calm satisfaction in observing the fruits of your effort, knowing that the city will be fed tonight, that families will gather around tables warmed by your bread, that children will bite into crusty loaves with delight. As the final tray slides into the oven, you begin the wind down of your own senses. The frenetic pace of the day softens in your mind. Your movements slow, your breaths lengthen, and the warm hum of the bakery becomes a soothing lull. The ovens hiss softly, cooling gradually, while the loaves emit faint steam, signaling their readiness. You run a hand along the counter, brushing away excess flour, tidying the space in a quiet, methodical ritual that signals the end of active labor. Outside, Rome darkens into night, the last glimmers of sunset fading from the sky. The streets are quiet, the city settling into evening routines. You pause for a final moment by the doorway, listening to the faint echo of distant voices and the soft patter of a stray dog's paws on the cobblestones. The world beyond the bakery is slowing, and the bakery itself mirrors this tranquility. The day's heat, motion, and noise fade into memory, replaced by a gentle, pervasive warmth that clings to your skin, your clothes, and the lingering scent of bread. Your hands rest on the edge of the counter, flour-streaked and worn, and you close your eyes briefly, savoring the quiet and the rhythm of a day fulfilled. You reflect on the simple truths of your craft, each loaf a product of time, care, and skill. Each crumb a testament to the city's dependence on your labor. Each rising of the dough a small, tangible victory. The bakery has breathed with you, moved with you, and now rests with you as well. The city sleeps outside, yet the warmth of your work remains inside, lingering in the aroma, the cooled loaves, and the quiet echoes of your labor. You take a final, deep breath, letting it fill you with calm and satisfaction. Rome may be vast, bustling, and unpredictable, but in the sanctuary of the bakery, you have found a rhythm, a purpose, and a comforting stillness. The day's work concludes, but the warmth lingers. You dim the lights inside, leaving only the residual glow from the cooling ovens. You brush flour from your tunic, stretch your arms once more, and allow the quiet satisfaction to settle deep into your muscles and mind. The city outside sleeps, but inside, the essence of your day, the warmth, the aroma, the rhythm, and the loaves themselves remains, a gentle companion for the approaching night. The bakery is still, The oven's quiet, and the last loaves cool, golden, and ready. You breathe in slowly, exhaling tension, and feel the day's labor fade into a soft, comforting memory. The warmth remains, subtle and enduring, echoing the simple, steadfast rhythm of bread, fire, and human care. You sit for a moment, leaning against the counter, letting the day's heat leave your body and your mind settle. The ovens hum faintly as their embers cool, a gentle rhythm that echoes the city's softened pulse. Outside, Rome is dark, streets quiet, and distant voices are hushed into whispers. The bakery is your sanctuary, a space where labor transforms into sustenance and effort into quiet pride. You feel the ache in your arms, the soreness in your back, yet it carries satisfaction, a tangible proof of a day well spent. The loaves cool on racks, golden and fragrant, filling the room with a comforting, persistent warmth. The smell of yeast and baked bread lingers in the air, a gentle reminder of what has been achieved. You breathe slowly, letting each exhale release tension, each inhale carry the faint aroma of accomplishment. The rhythm of kneading, stamping, and baking has faded, leaving only peace. Outside, night deepens, and a soft breeze drifts through the doorway, carrying muted city scents and distant hums. You close your eyes, savoring the quiet, the warmth, and the faint satisfaction of knowing that tonight families will eat well, children will smile at a fresh loaf, and the city will rest nourished. The world slows, and the bakery becomes a cocoon of calm, safe and steadfast, holding on to the day's gentle victories. Now, dim the lights, feel the residual warmth, and let your mind drift slowly into the night. The loaves, the ovens, the scent of bread, they are all quiet companions, lulling you into calm. The day has ended, your labor is complete, and peace, soft and unhurried, settles around you like a soft blanket. The city sleeps, and so can you, carried into rest by the warmth and rhythm of a life lived in careful, steady hands. End of script. Sweet dreams.